All right, let's get started. Jordan Peterson is being remanded to the gulag for re-education training. I mean, I suppose it was inevitable. Listen, if we're talking about power being the thing that the woke left covets above everything else, then what you need to do is start looking at every single censorship, every single cancellation, every single deplatforming, every single weird thing that the woke left does that holds back information or tries to get someone to bend the knee to their ideology, to think the way they want you to think, to talk the way they want you to talk. It is all and exclusively about gaining power over you. Kurt says, I'm surprised they didn't come for his license long before now. I totally agree with that, Kurt. I 100% agree. I'm shocked that it took this long. But let's read this thread that Jordan Peterson posted earlier today on Twitter. Breaking, the Ontario College of Psychologists has demanded that I submit myself to mandatory social media communications retraining with their experts for, among other crimes, retweeting Pierre and criticizing Justin Trudeau and his political allies. Oh, he's like the conservative leader. Okay, so Jordan Peterson is not allowed to retweet an elected politician. Oh, that's nice of them. I have been accused of harming people, although none of the complainants involved in the current action were clients of mine, past or present, or were even acquainted with any of my clients. Let's think about that for a second. How would Jordan Peterson be causing harm to people by retweeting elected politicians or being critical of an elected politician? How is that causing harm? Well, of course it's not. And here's the thing about it. Every single person involved knows that Jordan Peterson is not causing harm. Every single person. Jordan Peterson knows he's not causing harm. The Ontario College of Psychologists know that he's not causing harm. There are multiple people, I suppose. The people who reported Jordan Peterson damn well know that he's not causing them harm. And if there's any group on the planet who should know that words are not violence, it is a group of psychologists. The profession of psychology, and I'm sad to say this as a psychologist myself, is completely gone. It is destroyed. If a group of psychologists cannot stand up and say words are not violence, someone else's words don't cause you harm unless you allow those words to cause you harm. If a group of psychologists can't stand up and say that, there is no point to the entire profession at all. It is completely corrupted from the ground up. Now, that's not to say there are not excellent practitioners of psychology. For the record, I'm a little bit critical of psychiatry just in general. I'm not a Scientologist or anything, but there's a reason I don't talk about psychiatry. I think that people default way too quickly to medication and drugs. Some people need it, most people don't. So I'm not talking about psychiatry, which I think is a woke profession in and of itself, but also has a whole other set of problems associated with it. I'm a psychologist. I don't prescribe medication. I never did. I'm not a clinician. But there are excellent practitioners of psychology. There really are. And I want to make sure that's clear up front, because even though we can talk about the profession of psychology, we can talk about the governing bodies of psychology and say they are completely corrupt to the core. I don't want people to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because therapy for a lot of people is necessary at times in their lives. Therapy can be really helpful when you find the right person. And there are excellent practitioners out there that don't buy into any of this bullshit. You just have to find them. And so I don't want to dissuade people at all from seeking out help when they need it, because that help is available. It is not corrupted. And I want to encourage everyone to take advantage of it, because sometimes we just need a little extra help, and that's just the way it goes. But that's not what we're talking about right now. We are talking about a governing body demanding Jordan Peterson go to re-education camp because he said words they didn't like. I am to take a course of such training with reports documenting my progress, or faced an in-person tribunal and suspension of my right to operate as a licensed clinical psychologist. They are quite literally coming for his license. I've had a lot of people try to come for my license. Now, I'm an industrial organizational psychologist, so in the state of New Hampshire, joke's on them, I don't actually need a license to practice my profession. Haha, too bad, so sad. But I'll tell you what, I really I agree with what Kurt said earlier. I am shocked that they did not come for Jordan Peterson's license sooner. I really am. Because I had people threatening my license from like day one of me being on this red pill journey. And I was like, go ahead, report me to the state. They can't really do anything. But I'm really surprised it took them this long. When the woke left cancels people. Now, both the woke left and the right cancel people. Let's not pretend the right doesn't cancel people, they do. But there is a distinct difference, and I write about this in my book, Actively Unwoke, the ultimate guide for fighting back against woke insanity in your life. You can get your copy at activelyunwoke.com. Link in the description below. I talk about this in my book. There is a distinct difference between the way that the woke left cancels people and the way that the woke right cancels people. When the right cancels you, they try to go after your reputation. They make personal attacks. They call names. They spread rumors. They engage in smear campaigns extremely aggressively. It is all about attacking you personally. And they go on and on and on and on and on and do it in perpetuity. But they're not as successful at cancellation as the left. Because the fact of the matter is that a lot of times if a reeing mob on Twitter is like acting like a group of hysterics and they're saying burn the witch, burn the witch, burn the witch, burn the witch, she deserves to be burned. If that's what they're doing, they look like fucking crazy people. And so they might feel really good about trying to cancel someone, but oftentimes they aren't as successful. The woke left is significantly more successful because when they try to cancel people, what they do is they go after your income. They go after the way that you make a living. They go after your ability to function in society. Pay attention to this if you see it. The woke right, when they're canceling people, will always make personal attacks. The woke left attacks your money. They attack your license. They attack your banks. They attack your payment processors. They attack your jobs. That's much more damaging. It's a more controlled thing because it happens over a shorter period of time. But the long-term impacts of it are much more damaging. Now, the question that I have is Jordan Peterson still practicing as a clinical psychologist? I don't know the answer to this. I don't know if he's still practicing. I don't know. Maybe he's practicing, but we're talking about onesies and twosies here and there. He seems much more focused to me on like writing and commentary and traveling and teaching. So it might be a sacrifice that he's willing to make to give up his license. Because to be honest, he might not need it. Jordan Peterson is set financially. Like a clinical psychology license is not really going to like, it's not going to impact him being able to teach people. It's not going to be going to really impact his ability to help people. It's not going to do any of that. So he might very well be willing to give it up. I don't know the answer to that question, but maybe we'll find out. Let's keep reading. About a dozen people from all over the world submitted complaints about my public statements on Twitter and Rogan over a 4-year period. Out of the 15 million who follow me on social media, claiming that I had harmed people, not them, with my views. So think about so what I want you to hear in this one is that we're talking about a dozen people submitting complaints. That's minuscule in the amount of lives that Jordan Peterson has impacted. What that means is that what the Ontario College of Psychologists is doing has nothing to do with these complaints at all. It has nothing to do with these complaints at all. Not a single thing. What they are doing is a result of them wanting to get Jordan Peterson. And then they reverse engineered their way to find an excuse to get Jordan Peterson. So I want people to understand the process. It was not complaints come in, Ontario College of Psychologists go, ooh, there's a problem here. And then they demand Jordan Peterson go to the re-education gulag. That's not what happened. What happened is the Ontario College of Scientologists, I kept saying, I'm saying Scientologists in my head. That's a little bit of a Freudian slip, isn't it? What happened is the Ontario College of Psychologists wanted to nail Jordan Peterson's ass to the wall to get him to shut the F up. And then they said, ooh, look, people have complained about Jordan Peterson. We can use these complaints to nail Jordan Peterson's ass to the wall. And then they used the complaints, they lied about the process, and then they said, you have to go to re-education camp, Jordan, and if you don't do it, we're going to take your license. And by the way, even if you don't agree with anything you hear in that re-education camp, you better keep your mouth shut, because if you don't, we're going to take your license. That's what happened. Understanding the process of how these things play out behind closed doors is important. The actions that they took were not the result of the complaints. The complaints were used to justify the actions that they took. Let's keep going. Let me get into this thread. He wrote a lot more. In its wisdom, the Ontario College of Scientologists, I seriously keep saying Scientologists. In its wisdom, the Ontario College of Psychologists, maybe we should just call them the College of Scientologists. In its wisdom, they decided to pursue these complaints even though they could have dismissed them as vacuous. Well, again, Jordan Peterson's getting the process wrong. I have been accused of harming people, although none of the complainants involved in the current actions were clients of mine, past or present, or were ever acquainted with any of my clients. And even though many of them falsely claimed that they were or had been clients of mine and were allowed by the College of Scientology. I swear to God, I'm not doing this on purpose. And even though many of them falsely claimed that they were or had been clients of mine and were allowed by the College of Psychologists to have their complaints investigated despite this falsehood. Well, I mean, listen, with psychology, I don't know what the standards are in Canada. So I could be wrong about this, but it's my understanding. Again, I'm not a clinician, so if there are any psychologists in the chat, let me know if I'm wrong. You have to keep client records for 7 years. I know when I do research, I have to keep my research records for 7 years. I have to keep them. I have a filing cabinet in my closet that I have to keep all my research records in for 7 years before I'm allowed to destroy them. That's an ethical standard that the APA has. But Jordan Peterson is required to keep records of his clients. Why can't he just use those records to disprove that these people were ever clients? That would seem to be an easy solution for me. We are now in a situation in Canada under Justin Trudeau where practicing professionals can have their livelihoods and public reputations threatened in a very serious manner for agreeing with the official opposition and criticizing major government figures. Well, to be fair, Canada has been in this position for a while. This is why I don't buy Billboard Chris's bullshit at all. Listen, I know a lot of you guys like Billboard Chris, and I'm going to be honest, I was pretty ambivalent about Billboard Chris up until recently. Billboard Chris is that guy that goes to like protests and things, and he wears a sign that says like a father's job is to protect their kids from gender ideology. I had no problem with the guy. I really didn't. He's from Canada. I don't know why he's bringing his stuff to the United States if he's from Canada, but that's what he wants to do. He's helping talk to people. I had no issue with that. However, hang on. However, Billboard Chris lately has been making a ruckus on Twitter about how Canadian school choice is just perfect and how we should not go anything beyond what Canada does for school choice. And he's been attacking people who are against school choice. Now, I personally am in favor of school choice. I'm in favor of school choice not because I think it's going to fix the schools, but because I think it's a necessary step to get to bring people along with viewing schools more critically. So I personally am in favor of school choice. There are a lot of people, James Lindsay included, who are not in favor of school choice. And I understand why, and I understand their reasoning. I really, really do. For me, this is a change management thing, and that's why I'm in favor of it. Other people have different reasons. I don't want to get myself in the middle of this particular fight, except to say that Billboard Chris has been running around Twitter picking fights with everyone and their mother that's opposed to school choice and flaming them on Twitter saying, Canada has the perfect system. Canada has the perfect system. And every time he does this, I'm like, bro, Canada does not have a perfect system for anything. What are you talking about? You think that implementing the Canadian system is the solution for the culture war in America? Are you off your nut? And Jordan Peterson is saying the same thing. But like, this has been going on for a while. Does everyone forget about the truckers' protest? Did everyone forget how Canada basically stole all those donations for the truckers and then shut off access to their bank account? This is not a new thing in Canada. This has been going on for a long effing time in Canada. Canada is woke as shit. So I don't know why anyone is surprised about this, and I certainly don't know why Billboard Chris is running around Twitter going, the Canadian school system is what America should aspire to. No, dude. No. Wrong. If I comply, the terms of my re-education and my punishment will be announced publicly. I have already had the second most serious category of punishment levied against me and have been deemed at high risk to re-offend. Canadians, your physicians, lawyers, psychologists, and other professionals are now so intimidated by their commissioner overlords that they fear to tell you the truth. That means that your care and legal counsel has already been rendered dangerously unreliable. You know, this is all to make Jordan Peterson a public example of getting him to bend the knee. This is a humiliation ritual. This is like in Mao's China when they made dissidents wear those giant dunce caps and stand in front of these crowds of people that would yell and scream and admonish them for going against the regime. This is a public humiliation ritual to make an example of Jordan Peterson so that no one else dares do what Jordan Peterson did. Can anyone think of an example of a person in the United States that stuff like this might be happening to right now? Can anyone think of a very prominent example of who the establishment does this to in the United States? Exactly. Exactly. This is a struggle session. This is a struggle session perpetrated by the governing body of psychologists in Canada. Exactly. Trump. In the US, they do this to Trump. They're doing it to Trump. They're doing it to Trump right now. The release of Trump's tax returns, which is a whole lot of nothing, was a humiliation ritual. The January 6 hearings, in which they made this big show of, we're going to subpoena Donald Trump and refer him for charges, was a giant humiliation ritual. And did anyone hear that the January 6th committee decided to pull their subpoena for Donald Trump? It was almost as if the whole January 6th committee, those weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks of propaganda hearings, it was almost as though it was just a stunt to make it look like they were going to subpoena and charge Donald Trump. And then after they issue the subpoena, they renege and pull it back. Because no, psych, we weren't serious in the first place. And the reason they do this to Donald Trump is exactly the same reason they're doing it to Jordan Peterson in Canada. Because Donald Trump upset the apple cart. Donald Trump went back and tried to deconstruct everything the establishment overlords had built for decades and decades and decades. And they want to send the clear and incontrovertible message that you will never do this again. Don't you dare say something that we don't like. Don't you dare do something that works against us. If you do, we will humiliate you. We'll drag you through the mud. We'll go after everyone you know and love, and we will do it again and again and again and again and again and again until you get down on your knees and beg us to stop. That's the message that the United States government is sending to Donald Trump right now. And you don't have to be the biggest fan of Trump in the world to acknowledge that. And they're doing exactly the same thing to Jordan Peterson. And you don't have to be the biggest fan of Jordan Peterson to acknowledge that. Principles only mean something when you stand by them when they are inconvenient. If you are not going to stand up and say that what you are doing is wrong, when it happens to someone that you personally dislike, then you are not a principled person at all. Ask Queen's U law professor Party Bruce if he concurs on the legal front. I don't know who that is. To reiterate, I face public disgrace, mandatory political re-education, disciplinary hearings, and potential loss of my clinical licensing for agreeing with Pierre and criticizing our standing Prime Minister. I am willing, if the College of Psychologists, not Scientologists, concurs, which they won't, to make absolutely every word of this fully public so that everyone can decide for themselves what is happening and let the chips fall where they may. And then Elon Musk responded to him, basically saying like exclamation points. And Jordan Peterson retweeted that and said, "It's worse than you think in Canada, Elon Musk. Regulated professionals are now terrified into silence by their respective colleges. That means they are no longer able to say what they believe to be true. And who needs that from their lawyers, physicians, or psychologists?" One of the things, and this might seem boring, but I think you're going to see the necessity of it. One of the things that the libertarians in New Hampshire, and I know many other places, are trying to do is to get rid of professional licensing requirements. Jordan Peterson should not have to get permission from the government of Canada to practice psychology. Jordan Peterson's work should speak for itself. Jordan Peterson's experience should speak for itself. And people can choose to pay Jordan Peterson to practice psychology on them, or they can choose to go elsewhere based on how much they personally trust him to help them succeed. He should not need a license from the government controlled by a governing body of woke Scientologists to allow him to practice psychology. And yeah, I said Scientologists there purposefully. That was my only purposeful slip of the stream. And the same is true for all of you. The only reason right now, I am convinced that the only reason that I am still able to practice as an industrial organizational psychologist is because I don't need to be licensed. The state of New Hampshire does not require that I have a license. But they do require licenses for a lot of things. They require licenses for teaching, in which the State Department of Education gets to dictate the standards for licensing, which are always going to require going to college. How much would the profession of education be transformed if we got rid of the state licensure requirements for teachers and stopped mandating that they go to college? Because college is where the problems start when it comes to teacher education. So get rid of the licensing requirements. You all of a sudden completely open it up and create a completely different teaching pool. Why do people need a license to cut hair? Why do people literally need a license to hold a pair of scissors and cut hair? Okay, I understand that hairdressers do things with like chemicals and stuff like that, but it's fucking hair. It's going to grow back. People can look at reviews online to decide who's good at cutting hair and bad at cutting hair. People can look at people's books or portfolios to decide if they're good at coloring and doing all those things that they do with hair. Like, there are other ways to prove your bona fides other than getting a license from the state to bless you to practice your profession. And by the way, those licenses were used against hairdressers during the pandemic, weren't they? Where hairdressers were like, come to my house, I'll cut your hair. And then the state was like, no. If you do that, we'll take your licenses away. So people couldn't even get haircuts. There is absolutely no reason that the state should be giving permission for people to practice their profession. If people want to patronize a service, they have the right to do that. If they don't want to patronize that service, they don't have to. No one's forcing them to. And I'll say this too. These professional licensing bodies are part of the reason that all of these professions are going so woke in the first place. Because you look at something like the American Psychological Association, they are the ones, the APA are the ones that bless all of the psychology programs in the country. If you go and study psychology at a non-APA approved psychology program, you can't get licensed. If you can't get licensed, you don't practice. You could be the greatest psychologist in the history of psychologists. But if you don't follow the rules of the governing body, who today is made up of a group of woke leftists that are the APA actively prevents the publishing of research that is against the leftist political agenda. They really do. I've heard about it so many times. They prevent solid research from being published if it does not say what they want it to say. There is no reason that most professions need to be licensed by the state. And this is a boring topic. It's not something sexy. It's not something sparkly. It's not something that Tucker Carlson is going to do a rant about on Fox News. But this singular issue of getting rid of government licensing requirements could have so much positive impact on so many people in so many professions. And if they got rid of that in Canada, Jordan Peterson wouldn't have to go to the re-education gulag. Something to consider. Something to consider.